Hello again. To recap what we learned in the video on the purpose of assessment, the reason we assess is to use the learner's results from assessment to improve the teaching and learning experience. This video is going to focus on effective assessment in the classroom. We are going to speak about integrated language assessment and also about assessing learners with different learning styles. As I mentioned in the previous video, the recording of marks is merely a small step in the assessment process. As a language teacher, you should be following an integrated approach to language teaching. In other words, integrated assessment of various language aspects should be practiced. What does this mean? For example, you could start by reading a story and then doing a comprehension test. Set language questions based on the same story. During post-reading, ask the learners to respond to the text by writing a letter about the issues raised in the text, writing some creative response to the text, etc. To wrap up this activity, hold a class discussion about the moral of the story. In this way, you can address all of the language skills in one fluent, integrated activity. A basic story can cover so much language learning. Based on this example, you could assess reading, comprehension, language learning, creative writing, and speaking. Teachers cannot isolate concepts. All elements of language learning are integrated with each other. Language learning is an integrated process, so more than one skill will be developed. It follows that learners' progress should also be assessed in an integrated way. The language structures should be assessed in context. Do not only do written assessment work, but include practical and oral work too. It is important to assess what learners understand, and not just what they can memorize. Assess skills and context as much as possible. For example, learners may spell words correctly during a test, but are they able to spell those same words correctly when using them to write their own story? Albert Einstein said, "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid." This means that since we all learn differently, we also need to be assessed differently and fairly. No two learners will have the same strengths. Language assessment needs to be inclusive. This means that assessment of languages should make provision for the inclusion of all learners, and strategies should assist all learners to access or produce language texts. You need to keep the different learning styles in mind when teaching and assessing your learners. These include linguistic, logical mathematical, musical, bodily kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, and intrapersonal styles. You need to ask yourself if you value all learning styles in your teaching and assessment. Einstein's quote warns us to use appropriate methods when assessing our learners so that every single child is given the opportunity to achieve. You will need to complete the activity on effective assessment upon completing this video. You will then read about the characteristics of effective assessment, which will be followed by another activity.